Here is an easy do-it-yourself project decorating miniature glass jars or clear beads to look like the ones that are in a medical exam room or a healthcare spa. After I prepare the jars, then I fill it with supplies. So my personal challenge was to see what could I do with these 7/8 of an inch or so glass jars that I purchased at a craft store. And then, of course, I had to see if I could do it with other materials and in smaller scales, like my 1/44 scale. You may also be able to purchase a set of 3 glass jars. I have 2 sets that I'm showing. I bought them at dollhouse miniature shows, but I think you can find them online as well. The craft jars with the cork tops on the right-hand side could probably be modified as well. Maybe use a button for the top. It's got a little bit smaller opening, but I think the supplies will fit in just fine. The jar filler supplies are cotton tip applicators, tongue depressors, cotton balls, and gauze squares. Materials and suggested supplies are shown and listed below. Some of the ones that I am showing I don't use in this video. I decided to wait to make a stethoscope, a rubbing alcohol bottle, and some of the protective gloves. I'll do that in another video. Now I tried to lay out kind of how I was going to make the bottles, from the glass jars for the craft thing, the party favor little baby bottles, the pony beads, the seed beads, and then I'm thinking about what I'm going to do for some of the different lids, especially on the pony beads or the seed beads. So I decided to use those little micro no-hole beads, kind of way at the top right, in silver. And I was trying to see if it was the size of a pencil, a little circle dot. I guess this is maybe a number 2 pencil. And I thought, I don't know. So I glue a little dot on a piece of paper, and then I thought I'm going to draw little circle dots just to see if I could make a comparison on the size. I do think the little micro no-hole bead is larger than like a little pencil dot. But of course, in my little micro no-hole bead container, these little things all vary in different sizes as well. And they will work on the top of the lid for the smaller scales. I thought about adding a label to the bottles, and I printed out one that the font is DIN condensed, size 7 point. I did not add the labels to the bottles this time. I think I need to increase the size, so I'll do that later. To make the filler supplies for the 1/12 scale, I looked at regular tongue depressors and the cotton tip applicators, and they're about 6 inches. So I'm going to make them about 1/2 inch. And then the gauze can be in 2x2s, the 4x4s. There are a number of ways and charts or graphs to help convert regular size to a different scale. I generally divide the regular size by the scale, like 1/12. Or for the depressor, 6 inches divided by 12 equals 0.5 or 1/2 inch. To make the gauze squares, I folded up a regular facial or tissue sheet so that I could cut multiple pieces at a time into small squares about 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch. And then I placed them into the little jar, and I layered them with the tweezers and a toothpick. For the cotton balls, I fill the jar with white microfoam polystyrene balls. The sizes are about 2 millimeters or 1/16 of an inch in diameter. There are almost 50 faux-looking cotton balls in this jar. If you put some cotton balls on the countertop or whatever scene you're using it for, you could put tiny wisps of real cotton balls around a microfoam ball by applying a bit of glue to the outside and rolling the cotton fiber around the ball. Add the foam balls to the jar with a tweezer. There are a number of ways to change the supplies. Here I show pastel color cotton balls. Add some acrylic paint to a container, then place some microfoam balls into it. Mix the balls until they're covered in paint. I move the wet paint balls off to the upper lid of the little cap so they can dry. When dry, add them to a jar. To create the tiny tongue depressors, cut 1/2 inch in length by a 1/16 width using tan or light brown paper. I'm using a 1/16 inch quilling strip. and then I cut the ends in a semicircle shape. I make little angle cuts to each end, and then I add them to the jar. So when I'm showing you that I'm making the little circle cuts at the end, I'm using a larger strip. But it was easier for me to cut half-inch pieces and then cut the pieces. But I wanted to get my fingers out of the way so I could show you what I was doing. The mini cotton tip applicators are made with a half-inch piece of broom straw strand base. The piece of broom straw can be thinned out by dividing it vertically by using a craft knife or even a quilting pin, and then you can gently pull it apart. And cut those into half-inch pieces. Then dip it about 1/8 of an inch all the way around in acrylic white paint. I put it in small clamps, if you see there off to the left, to let that dry. And once the paint is dry, then I dip it in glue and put that all the way around. I'm using a larger strand, so hopefully you can see it better. And then I have there's the glue, and then I have a little cup that I have white flocking, fine white flocking that I use. And then I'm going to apply that all the way around the edge of that, if you can see that. And I'm going to let that dry. Again, that's a longer strip just so you can maybe see it better. When dry, add 20 to 30 to a jar. Instead of using broom straw as the base, another option I tried was embroidery floss. I took about 6-inch strand of light brown tan embroidery floss, 2 to 3 strands. Then I stiffened it with glue, cut it into half-inch length pieces, and then I repeated the process of paint on the end with glue flocking. Labels could be added to the bottles too. I may add them later. I used a font called DIN Condensed 7PT. For the 1/12 scale jars, I modified the glass one, clear on the left, by cutting off the top plastic pull. You could leave this on. But then I punch out a silver 1/4 inch diameter piece using just a very thin foil. Then I glue it on the top of the cap. Next, I use a quilter pin to make a center hole in the top of the cap. Then I use a flat top straight sewing pin and place a clear 11/0 sized seed bead and then a clear 15/0 seed bead below it. You can use any color combination as I show on the right hand side. Use a wire cutter to cut the excess wire that's a little bit longer than the cap. Insert it in to the cap, and then what I did is I flip it around and I add glue to the inside. And that's to strengthen and secure that little metal piece in case I want to pull the cap back out. Don't use super glue, it doesn't work with this plastic. Another jar option is to use a plastic baby bottle. I think they're shower favors from a craft or party store. The height is about 3/4 to an inch. First, I cut the top end or the nipple end off about 1/8 of an inch or so. Next, sand the tip. I'm using an emery board, but you could use abrasion paper or sandpaper. Then wipe off any of the little filings. And then I'm using a silver paint and I'm going to paint the cap. I go all the way around and I get the nib and I paint it all silver. After the silver paint dries, I add the supplies from the bottom end, which is opened. And then I use a paper punch, 1/4 inch in diameter, to cut out a circle of either paper or cardstock and glue it to the base of the baby bottle to seal it. And a third option to make the 1/12 scale little medical jars is to use pony beads. I glued together 2 clear acrylic pieces. They are 1/4 inch in height a piece with a 5/16 inch diameter, or a 6x9 millimeter pony bead with a 4 millimeter hole inside. Then I glue a 1/4 inch diameter paper or cardstock piece to the one end or the base end. For the lid, I glue 2 7/32 inch diameter and 1/16 of an inch thick 2-hole craft buttons together. Then I paint them silver. Next, I cut 26 gauge silver floral wire, like an inch to maybe an inch and a half in length. I bend it in half and I use the back end of my tweezers. I leave about 1/8 of an inch loop on top of the buttons, and then I leave about 1/8 of an inch underneath the button. Fill the pony bead with your supplies and then glue the button lid top. For the smaller scales, I glue 2 clear beads together, and then I glue a top and a knob, either a button or a seed bead or a micro bead. The smaller 1/24 scale are 2 pony beads that are clear, 5/32 of an inch in diameter and about 1/8 in height. The lid is 1/1/8 inch diameter craft button with a painted silver, and then I glue 11/aught seed bead on top for the knob. You can glue strings of tan and white on the inside for filler supplies. For the 1/48 or 1/4 scale, I glued 2 clear 11/aught seed beads together. Then I add a dotted glue to the top and place a small silver micro no-hole bead on the top for the lid. The 1/44 scale or micro scale are 2 clear 15/aught seed beads glued together with a silver micro no-hole bead also glued on the top for the lid. I hope you enjoyed this video of miniature medical healthcare office supply jars. Thank you so much for watching and sharing.